Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving headfirst into one of the biggest philosophical showdowns of all time, the great debate of modern ethics. We're talking about a period where the world was spinning faster and faster, the old rules were breaking down, and people were desperately trying to figure out what's our new moral compass. The big question was, should we trust our rational minds, or should we trust our gut feelings to tell us right from wrong? All right, let's get into it.
So this really hits the nail on the head. For centuries, morality was pretty straightforward. It was handed down from above. But as science and new ideas started to take hold, that old rulebook began to fall apart. And suddenly, the question became incredibly urgent. If the old rules don't apply anymore, then what does? Philosophers had to try and build an entirely new foundation for morality, right from the ground up.
And to really get why this was such a big deal, we have to look at where this moral vacuum came from. This table shows the massive flip in thinking. See, in the medieval era, everything was theocentric. God was at the center of it all. Truth came from faith. But then comes the Renaissance, and the script gets completely flipped to anthropocentrism. The focus is now on us, on human beings. Truth is something we discover through our own reason and experience. And that wasn't just a minor tweak, it was a total earthquake in how people saw themselves and the universe.
And this new, human-centered way of thinking is called anthropocentrism. It's this idea that we, humanity, are now in the driver's seat. And while that's incredibly empowering, it also created a huge problem. Because if God isn't making the rules anymore, then who is? It was exactly this question, this void, that modern philosophy charged in to try and answer.
So this sets the stage for our first contender in the great debate, the Rationalists. Their motto was simple: trust your mind. These thinkers were absolutely convinced that the answers to ethics and morality weren't hidden somewhere out in the world, but were locked right inside our own heads, accessible through nothing more than pure, universal logic. The frontman for Team Rationalist was, of course, René Descartes. He wanted to build a philosophy that was basically bulletproof, something built on absolute certainty. And to do it, he came up with this pretty radical four-step method. First, don't accept anything as true unless you are 100% sure it's clear and distinct. Second, chop up every problem into its tiniest possible pieces. Third, start with the simplest piece and slowly, logically build your way up to the complex stuff. And finally, check your work, review everything, make sure you didn't miss a single thing. His goal was to create a system that was completely free of doubt. And when I say free of doubt, I mean he took it to the absolute extreme. Descartes kicked things off with a process called hyperbolic doubt. He decided he was going to doubt every single thing he possibly could. Why? Well, because our senses can fool us, right? A stick looks bent in water, we mishear a song lyric. If our senses can trick us even once, how can we ever fully trust them? He went so far as to doubt that his own body was even real.
So after he'd thrown everything out, the world, his body, all of it, Descartes was left with one single thing he couldn't possibly doubt. He realized that he couldn't doubt the fact that he was doubting. And if he's doubting, he has to be thinking. And if he's thinking, well, then he must exist. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And that one simple truth became the bedrock, the unshakable foundation for his entire philosophy. Now, building on this foundation of pure reason, another rationalist, Baruch Spinoza, took this idea in a really fascinating direction. For Spinoza, God wasn't some separate being sitting on a cloud creating everything. He used pure logic to arrive at this idea of an immanent God, the idea that God is nature. Everything you see, everything that exists, is just a part of this one single infinite substance. It's a completely different, but still deeply rational way to see the universe. And just to show you how powerful this idea was, get this. Centuries later, Albert Einstein himself said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, a God who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists." That just goes to show you that this quest for a rational understanding of everything had a massive, lasting impact.
Okay, so Team Rationalist is all about logic, logic, logic. But of course, not everyone was buying it. And this brings us to the competition, the Empiricists. Their philosophy was basically the polar opposite. They argued that true knowledge, and by extension, our sense of morality, comes from one place and one place only: your senses, your real-world experience.
And this slide right here, this is the main event. This is the philosophical face-off. In one corner, you've got Descartes, the rationalist, saying reason is king and our senses can't be trusted. And in the other corner, you have David Hume, a leading empiricist, arguing the exact opposite, that experience is the only thing we can trust. These are two worldviews on a collision course. Hume took this idea and ran with it, especially when it came to morality. He famously dropped this bombshell of a line: "Reason is the slave of the passions." So what on earth did he mean by that? He believed our moral compass isn't based on logic at all. It's based on feelings. We feel something is right, or we feel it's wrong. And reason's job is just to be the servant, to figure out the cleverest way to get what our emotions already want. So this is the fundamental difference in how they see a moral act. For a rationalist, deciding if something is wrong is like solving a math problem. You apply abstract logical rules. But for an empiricist like Hume, it's more like tasting food. Is it good or bad? Well, it depends on the feeling it creates, a sense of pleasure and approval, or a sense of displeasure. It's a cold, hard logic system versus a system based entirely on feeling.
So for decades, philosophy was kind of stuck in this epic tug of war between reason and experience. And then along comes Immanuel Kant. He read David Hume's work and famously said it awakened him from his dogmatic slumber. He had a light bulb moment. He realized both sides had a point, and he set out to build a third way, a revolutionary synthesis that could finally bring them together. And this quote just perfectly captures his whole project. All our knowledge begins with the senses, proceeds them to the understanding, and ends with reason. Basically, Kant is saying, hey, you're both right. He's agreeing with the empiricists that everything starts with experience from the outside world. But he's also agreeing with the rationalists that our mind isn't just a blank slate. It has its own built-in software, its own rules for organizing all that information. So what does this brilliant synthesis mean for ethics? Well, this is where Kant gives us his most famous idea of all, the categorical imperative. Now, it sounds super complicated, but just think of it as a universal moral rulebook that's generated by pure reason. It's categorical because it's absolute, no ifs, ands, or buts, and it's an imperative because it's a command, a duty to act the right way, no matter how you feel about it or what the outcome might be.
Yeah, I know, categorical imperative sounds like something you'd read in a dry textbook. So let's bring it down to earth with a simple, modern problem. Picture this. You're driving, you're super late for something incredibly important, and you look around, the roads are completely empty. And that little voice pops into your head, right? Hey, you could totally speed here. Just this once. No one's around. What's the harm?
Okay, hit the brakes. This is where you apply what we can call the Kant test. He'd tell you to stop and ask yourself one simple but really powerful question. Am I okay with turning my action into a universal law for every single person who is late for something important? In other words, are you willing to make a rule that says everyone should speed whenever they're late?
And when you think about it like that, the answer has to be a hard no, right? Imagine the chaos if that was the rule. It would be absolute mayhem on the roads. It's just not a logical or sustainable law. And that perfectly illustrates Kant's most famous rule. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. It's a purely rational test for what's right and wrong, and it takes your personal feelings completely out of the equation.
And this final quote from Kant, wow, it just beautifully sums up his entire worldview. Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. For him, the incredible rational order of the universe that you see in the stars at night was the exact same kind of beautiful, rational order that existed inside our own minds as a moral compass. So here we are, after this whirlwind tour, from Descartes' pure reason to Hume's powerful feelings to Kant's incredible attempt to bring it all together. The debate lands right back at our feet. And it really makes you think. In your own life, when you're faced with a tough moral choice, what's really running the show? Your head or your heart? Is it cold, hard logic? Or is it that undeniable pull of emotion? It's a question that's just as real for us today as it was for them hundreds of years ago.